For years, Rush fans believed one question would never need an answer. Who could possibly replace Neil Peart? After Peart's passing in 2020, most fans assumed that Rush's story had reached its final chapter. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson repeatedly spoke about how important Neil had been to the band's identity. To many people, Rush without Neil simply wasn't Rush. So when rumors of a return began circulating, fans immediately started making lists of famous drummers, progressive rock legends, arena rock veterans, big-name musicians with decades of experience. The assumption seemed obvious. If Rush ever came back, they would choose one of the most recognizable drummers in rock, but that isn't what happened. Instead, Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson stunned the music world by choosing German drummer Anika Nilles, a musician known more in fusion and modern drumming circles than in classic rock. For many casual fans, the announcement raised an immediate question: why her? What made Anika Nilles stand out above so many famous drummers who were available? The answer is far more surprising than most people realize. Lee checked out her performances online. What he found was a drummer with extraordinary technical ability, creative independence, and a unique musical voice. Unlike many drummers who built careers imitating famous players, Nilles had developed her own style. Still, impressive YouTube videos are one thing. Playing Rush music alongside Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson is something entirely different. That's when a quiet invitation was extended. No public announcement, no media coverage, no promises, just an opportunity to come to Canada and see what happened when the three musicians shared a room together. What followed would become one of the most important and emotionally complicated weeks in Rush history. And by the end of it, Geddy and Alex would realize they had found something they never expected. Not a replacement for Neil Peart, something else entirely. To understand why that distinction mattered so much, we need to look inside the private sessions where Anika Nilles faced the impossible challenge of convincing two Rush legends that moving forward was even possible. When Anika Nilles arrived for the private rehearsals, she knew exactly what was at stake. This wasn't just another audition. She was stepping into a room occupied by two musicians who had spent nearly 5 decades performing alongside one of the greatest drummers in rock history. Every song, every transition, every musical instinct Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson had developed was connected to Neil Peart. The pressure was enormous, yet what happened next surprised everyone involved. According to comments later shared by Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, the goal was never to find someone who could become a clone of Neil Peart. In fact, that approach would have failed immediately. Nobody could truly replace Neil's unique combination of technical mastery, lyric writing, composition, and stage presence. Instead, they were looking for something much more difficult. They wanted a drummer who could honor the music while still sounding like themselves. From the first rehearsals, Nilles approached the challenge differently than many veteran rock drummers might have. Rather than treating Rush songs as museum pieces that had to be copied note for note, she focused on understanding the musical conversations happening inside the songs. That immediately caught Lee and Lifeson's attention. Rush's music has always been built around interaction. The band wasn't simply a drummer supporting a guitarist and bassist. Neil's parts constantly pushed and responded to what Geddy and Alex were playing. To perform the music successfully, a drummer had to understand those relationships, not just memorize patterns. And that's where Nilles excelled. Years of performing complex fusion, progressive, and experimental music had trained her to listen deeply and react in real time. She wasn't just counting measures, she was engaging in a musical dialogue. As the rehearsals continued, something unexpected began happening. The room started feeling less like an audition and more like a band. Every rehearsal inevitably carried memories of Neil Peart. Every classic song reminded them of decades spent touring, recording, and building one of rock's most respected catalogs together. If moving forward was going to happen, the chemistry had to feel natural. And soon, Geddy and Alex realized that Anika Nilles possessed another quality that was just as valuable as her drumming skills, a quality that many famous veteran drummers simply couldn't offer. It had nothing to do with speed, nothing to do with fame, and everything to do with personality. That discovery would ultimately become one of the deciding factors in why she was chosen over more established names. As news of Rush's return began spreading through the music world, fans naturally started asking which drummers had been considered. The truth is, there were plenty of experienced candidates who could have played the songs. Many veteran drummers possessed the technical skill required for classics like Tom Sawyer, YYZ, and La Villa Strangiato. Some even had decades of arena rock experience and massive fan followings. But Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson weren't searching for the biggest resume. They were searching for the right fit. And that distinction changed everything. One challenge with hiring a famous veteran drummer is that many arrive with an established identity that audiences already associate with another band. The focus can quickly shift away from the music and toward constant comparisons. Rush wanted to avoid that trap. They didn't want every performance to become a debate about whether someone was copying Neil Peart or trying to outdo him. That would have placed both the drummer and the audience in an impossible situation. Anika Nilles offered something different. She was already highly respected among musicians, especially within modern drumming circles, but she wasn't carrying decades of baggage from another legendary rock group. She could walk onto the stage as herself. That mattered. Even more important was the attitude she brought into rehearsals. By all accounts, Nilles never approached the opportunity as though she had something to prove. She wasn't trying to become the center of attention. She wasn't attempting to redefine Rush's legacy. Instead, she focused on serving the music. For Geddy and Alex, that humility became incredibly valuable. After years of playing with Neil Peart, a musician known for his discipline, professionalism, and dedication, the last thing they needed was an ego-driven environment. What they found in Nilles was someone who came prepared, worked hard, listened carefully, and respected the history of the band while contributing her own musical personality. That combination created trust, and trust is often what determines whether a group succeeds or falls apart. As rehearsals continued, another important realization emerged. The more they played together, the more obvious it became that Nilles wasn't trying to sound exactly like Neil. Ironically, that may have been the very reason she worked so well. Because the goal was never replacement. The goal was continuation. And once Geddy and Alex fully understood that difference, they began seeing a future that had previously seemed impossible. But there was still one final test. A moment during rehearsal that reportedly convinced them they had made the right choice. A moment that transformed confidence into certainty. By this stage of the rehearsals, Anika Nilles had already demonstrated that she possessed the technical skills necessary to perform Rush's music. But technical ability alone wasn't enough. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson had spent decades performing in one of the most demanding bands in rock history. They knew that great concerts aren't built solely on precision, they're built on connection. And that connection can only be tested when musicians truly begin playing together. As rehearsals moved forward, the focus shifted away from individual performances and toward chemistry. Could the music breathe naturally? Would spontaneous moments develop? Could the musicians react to one another the way great bands do? According to comments shared in interviews, the answer became increasingly clear. Yes. Instead of constantly looking backward, the group started looking forward. And that's when one particular realization hit Geddy and Alex. Anika wasn't helping them recreate the past. She was helping them build a future. That distinction changed everything. Because if the goal had been to perfectly reproduce every aspect of Rush's classic era, the project would have been doomed from the start. Fans would inevitably compare every note, every fill, and every performance to the original recordings. No one could win that comparison, not even the greatest drummer alive. But by embracing a new chapter rather than chasing an old one, the music suddenly felt alive again. The rehearsals stopped feeling like an experiment. They started feeling real. Soon discussions that once seemed impossible became serious conversations. Could they actually perform together publicly? Could audiences accept this new lineup? Could Rush's music continue reaching new generations? As those questions moved closer to becoming reality, one final factor strengthened Geddy and Alex's confidence. It wasn't about drumming. It wasn't about fame. It was about how fans themselves were beginning to react to Anika Nilles, and those reactions would play a major role in what happened next. Once word began spreading that Anika Nilles was working with Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, reactions from fans were mixed. Some were excited immediately. Others were skeptical. That skepticism was understandable. Rush fans are among the most passionate and knowledgeable music fans in the world. For decades, Neil Peart's drumming had been a defining part of the band's identity. Any musician stepping into that role was bound to face intense scrutiny. At first, many fans asked the same question: why not choose a famous rock drummer everyone already knows? But as more people took a closer look at Nilles' work, opinions started changing. Drummers especially recognized what Geddy and Alex had seen during the private rehearsals. Her technical control, creativity, timing, and musical intelligence were undeniable. Videos of her performances had already earned respect from musicians around the world long before she became connected to Rush. What impressed many observers even more was her attitude. Rather than trying to market herself as the next Neil Peart, Nilles consistently showed respect for Rush's legacy while remaining true to her own style. She understood something important that many fans eventually came to appreciate as well. Neil Peart's position could never truly be filled. The goal wasn't replacement. The goal was celebration. As public appearances and performances generated discussion, more fans began viewing the situation through that lens. Instead of asking whether Anika was identical to Neil, they started asking a different question. Was she helping keep the music alive? For a growing number of listeners, the answer was yes. That shift in perception mattered because it reflected the same conclusion Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson had reached months earlier during rehearsals. The magic wasn't coming from imitation. It was coming from authenticity. Anika Nilles wasn't trying to become somebody else. She was bringing her own voice into music that had always thrived on individuality. And perhaps that's the most Rush-like approach imaginable. After all, Rush spent their entire career refusing to follow expectations. They constantly evolved, experimented, and challenged assumptions about what the band could be. Now, decades later, that same spirit seemed to be guiding another major decision. But there was one final piece of the story. A deeper reason why Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson ultimately chose Anika Nilles. A reason that goes beyond auditions, technical skills, or even chemistry. A reason that reveals what this decision was really about from the very beginning. So what was the shocking reason Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson chose Anika Nilles? In the end, it wasn't because she was the fastest drummer, it wasn't because she was the most famous candidate, and it certainly wasn't because she could replace Neil Peart. The real reason was much deeper. She allowed Geddy and Alex to move forward without pretending the past could be recreated. That may sound simple, but it was the single biggest challenge facing any potential drummer. Anyone can learn parts. Anyone can study recordings. Very few musicians can walk into a situation filled with decades of history, emotion, expectation, and grief, and somehow make the future feel possible again. That's what Anika Nilles accomplished. She respected Neil Peart's legacy without trying to imitate it. She honored Rush's music without treating it like a museum exhibit. And she brought enough creativity, confidence, and humility to help two legendary musicians rediscover the joy of playing together. For Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, that combination proved more valuable than celebrity status or rock and roll credentials, because the decision was never about finding another Neil Peart. There will only ever be one Neil. Instead, the decision was about finding someone capable of helping the music continue while preserving the spirit that made Rush special in the first place. And according to the people who know the situation best, Anika Nilles became that person. Looking back, the choice actually makes perfect sense. Rush was never a band that followed the obvious path. Throughout their career, they took risks, embraced change, and trusted musicianship over popularity. Choosing Anika reflected those same values. The irony is that many fans expected a famous veteran rock drummer to get the job. But Geddy and Alex weren't searching for a familiar name. They were searching for the right person. And after the private rehearsals, the chemistry, the conversations, and the music they created together, they believed they had found exactly that. Whether you're a lifelong Rush fan or someone discovering this story for the first time, one thing is clear. The choice of Anika Nilles wasn't about replacing a legend. It was about honoring one while creating a new chapter. And sometimes, the most surprising decision turns out to be the one that makes the most sense. What do you think? Did Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson make the right choice with Anika Nilles? Or would you have preferred to see a different drummer behind the kit? Let us know in the comments.